Now listen up, and let me tell you a story about a man who just wanted a little peace. The old folks always said, a man's home is his castle, and that's a lesson that runs deep in our bones. But what happens when the very people meant to be your neighbors start acting like they own the whole kingdom? This is a story about a lesson learned, a stand taken, and how one man's quiet resolve gave a whole neighborhood the courage to stand up for themselves. Robert Bobby Johnson had worked for nearly 40 years to get his slice of the American dream. A quiet house in a tidy suburb of Charlotte, a big front porch, and a brand new electric SUV he'd bought with his wife Marlene to save a little on gas. But instead of peace, he found himself in a quiet war with his electric bill. The number on the page didn't just creep up, it jumped, soaring almost $200 higher than what he usually paid. At first, he blamed the kids for leaving the lights on, or maybe the dryer running overtime. But after checking everything, nothing lined up. His family's habits hadn't changed, his home office was the same, and his SUV wasn't charging more often than usual. Still, that number gave him a bad feeling deep in his stomach. Robert, a man who prided himself on keeping things in order, had a good eye for patterns, and something here just screamed that somebody or something was draining his power. He started checking the meter every night, jotting the numbers down in a little notepad. By the end of the week, the pattern was undeniable. Power was being pulled when he and his family were fast asleep. One night, Robert stepped out onto his driveway just after midnight. Most of the houses had gone dark hours ago, yet his charging station's light blinked faintly, like it was in use. He had unplugged his own car before bed, so how was it drawing power? He ran his hand across the cable. It was still warm. Someone had been here. He didn't want to believe it at first. Neighbors were supposed to look out for each other, not sneak around in the dead of night. But Robert wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. If someone was bold enough to steal from him, he was going to get the proof. The next morning, Robert picked up a small motion-activated camera. Nothing fancy, but it would do the job. He set it up facing the driveway, angled perfectly toward the charging outlet. He felt like a guard on watch, waiting for something he hoped he wouldn't see. When the footage loaded the next day, his stomach tightened. There in the grainy black and white video was his neighbor, Priscilla Hensley. She wasn't some stranger. She lived right across the street in the two-story brick house with the manicured hedges. She was 56 years old and carried herself with the stiff, commanding air of a woman who was used to telling others what to do. And there she was, crouched by his driveway, calmly plugging her Tesla into his charger as if it belonged to her. Robert replayed the clip 3 times, hardly able to believe it. She didn't look rushed, guilty, or even nervous. She acted like she had every right to be there, and that arrogance burned him more than the theft itself. He could almost feel the money leaving his bank account as he watched her car sit there for hours. Robert knew Priscilla. Everyone in the neighborhood did. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the HOA treasurer, the one who handed out warnings for grass that was half an inch too tall or trash bins that stayed on the curb for too long. Confronting her meant opening a door he wasn't sure he could close. Yet the thought of doing nothing gnawed at him. Every time he pulled into his driveway, he felt her eyes on him from across the street, as if she was daring him to say something. He told himself he'd wait until the next bill came, but deep down he knew the truth. The line had already been crossed. Robert didn't waste time. The following week, he stacked up more video clips, leaving no doubt this wasn't a misunderstanding. By Friday, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He printed still shots from the video, slid them into a folder, and walked across the street. His hands felt clammy as he rang her doorbell. After a moment, Priscilla opened the door. She looked surprised for a second, then that familiar look of superiority washed over her face. "Why, Robert?" she said smoothly. "What brings you over?" "I think you already know," he said, keeping his voice steady. He handed her the folder. "I've been having some issues with my electric bill, so I set up a camera." Priscilla flipped through the photos, her face unreadable. For a moment, Robert thought she might apologize. Instead, she closed the folder and handed it back with a faint smirk. "You're being dramatic," she said. "This is a community. Resources are meant to be shared. You've got a charger just sitting out there. I figured you wouldn't mind." Robert's jaw tightened. "Wouldn't mind? You're stealing my electricity, Priscilla. That's not sharing." That's theft. Her expression hardened. Watch your words and remember who keeps this neighborhood running. If you're going to nitpick about a little electricity, maybe we should revisit whether your driveway setup is even compliant. Those wires, those fixtures, do you have approval for that? There it was. The threat. Not even subtle. For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed her face. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Careful, Robert. I'd hate for you to make this bigger than it needs to be. Let's just call it even. Robert shook his head. No, it ends tonight. Don't touch my outlet again. For a moment, they locked eyes, the tension thick as concrete. Then Priscilla smiled faintly. We'll see, she said, and closed the door. Robert walked back across the street, his hands shaking not from fear but from fury. She hadn't even tried to deny it. She acted like she owned the place. Later that night, his wife Marlene asked softly, "Do you think she'll stop?" He didn't answer right away. Deep down, he knew the truth. A woman like Priscilla didn't back down just because she got caught. If anything, she'd double down, convinced she could outmaneuver him. Sure enough, the next morning, Robert checked the camera footage. There she was again, crouching by the charger at 1:30 in the morning. He slammed his fist on the table. She wasn't just stealing, she was daring him to do something about it. He paced the living room, his mind running in circles. He could go to the police, but what would he say? His neighbor plugged into his outlet? He could take it to the HOA board, but she was the treasurer, with allies and influence. He pictured her laughing about it at the next meeting, spinning the story to make him look paranoid. No, Robert thought. If this is going to end, I have to handle it myself. He sat down at his desk, staring at the footage one more time. The solution didn't come instantly, but a seed began to form in his mind. If she wouldn't stop, maybe it was time to make sure she couldn't. That weekend, Robert drove to an electronic supply store. He asked the clerk about a surge protection system, designed to cut off power when unauthorized use was detected. He bought a heavy-duty setup without hesitation, his resolve hardening with every mile back home. As he installed it later that weekend, he felt a strange calm settle over him. This wasn't about revenge. It was about drawing a line and reclaiming control. He had been pushed, prodded, and mocked long enough. If Priscilla thought she could keep draining his outlet, she was in for a shock. Robert spent most of Saturday in his garage, treating the surge protector like it was war prep. He wanted a system that would recognize when his car wasn't connected and instantly cut off power. He wasn't aiming to destroy anything, but if consequences came, so be it. By late afternoon, he tightened the final screw, stepped back, and exhaled. The charger now had a hidden safeguard. He tested it with his SUV. It worked. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of control. That chance came, sooner than he thought. Sunday evening, Robert sat in his living room with the camera feed open on his laptop, a habit he'd developed over the past few weeks. At midnight, movement flickered across the screen. There she was, Priscilla striding across the street in her cardigan. Robert's chest tightened as he and Marlene watched. Priscilla knelt at the charger, glanced around briefly, then plugged in. For a split second, the light on her Tesla flickered green, and then the safeguard tripped. Her head jerked up. She pulled the cable out, shoved it back in, and pulled it again. Robert couldn't hear her from inside, but he imagined the curses spilling from her lips. Then, a faint spark flashed near the base of her charger port. She recoiled, staring in disbelief. Seconds later, the Tesla system shut down entirely. No lights, no response, just dead silence. Marlene covered her mouth, her eyes wide. "Did you see that?" Tobias leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. It worked. Outside, Priscilla stood frozen for a long moment, staring at her car like it had betrayed her. She yanked the plug, free, and stomped back across the street, her face twisted in fury. Robert exhaled a mix of relief and adrenaline. He had taken back his ground. By Monday evening, everyone in the neighborhood had heard about Priscilla's Tesla. A story that started with a tow truck quickly ballooned into gossip, passed over backyard fences, and in hushed tones at mailboxes. For once, the woman who normally held all the power in the HOA was on the receiving end of the whispers. From his porch, Robert overheard two neighbors walking their dogs. "Did you see Priscilla this morning? Car wouldn't even start." "About time she got a taste of her own medicine," the other muttered. "She's been riding people for years." Robert sipped his coffee, feeling a guilty satisfaction. But Priscilla wasn't the type to accept defeat. The very next day, a new notice showed up in his mailbox. This one accused him of endangering the community by installing hazardous equipment and warned of an emergency HOA meeting. It was exactly as he feared. She was going to weaponize the HOA against him. Robert told his son, Malik, "She thinks she can twist the story until I'm the villain, but she's not just stealing, she's daring me to back down." The following morning, as Robert headed to his car, Donna Myers waved him down. "Hey, I just wanted you to know," she whispered, "you're not alone. Half this neighborhood is sick of her. People are quietly cheering for you." Later, Roger Kim came over. "Be careful," he said. "She's telling everyone you sabotaged her Tesla. She's got connections." Robert sighed, but inside he felt a strange resolve. "I don't care," he said. "I won't let her bully me, not anymore." The fire really spread during the HOA's emergency meeting. The community center was packed, and the air buzzed with heated chatter. Priscilla stood at the podium in a sharp blazer, her voice ringing through the microphone. "This community has always valued order," she declared, "but recently that respect has been undermined." She was already twisting the story. When it was his turn, Robert rose, his voice steady despite the nerves. "I'm not here to argue about bylaws," he said. "I'm here to talk about theft." He laid the printed stills on the table, clear shots of Priscilla crouched at his outlet. "For weeks, this woman came onto my property in the middle of the night to use my charger without permission. This isn't about community safety, it's about her abuse of power." Gasps echoed through the room. "Only a hit dog hollers," a voice shouted from the back. The room erupted. Some clapped, others jeered, but the division was clear. This wasn't a simple dispute anymore. After the meeting, neighbors gathered around Robert, offering quiet words of support. "About time someone held her accountable," one said. "She's been riding us all for too long." Others, still loyal to Priscilla, glared openly. The next week, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. People were sharing their own stories of ridiculous fines and threats. The woman who had once controlled the subdivision with fear found herself cornered by her own history. At the final HOA meeting, the board listened to the testimonies. One by one, residents spoke up about fines for gnomes, for kids' bikes, for holiday decorations. Finally, the board president spoke. By unanimous vote, the board has decided to remove Priscilla Hensley from her position as treasurer, effective immediately. Cheers erupted. For the first time, her power was gone. Robert knew his fight had been worth it. He hadn't just stood up for himself, he